The chamber was not built for a creature like Elias Thorne. It was a geodesic dome of fused crystal on the orbital plate of Viridia Prime, the air thick with the scent of ozone and alien pheromones. Light refracted through the walls in painful, beautiful shards, illuminating the assembled dignitaries of the galactic concord. There were the insectoid Cthari, their chitinous forms clicking softly, compound eyes reflecting a mosaic of the room, the gelatinous, Yzuvier, pulsating with gentle bioluminescence, the Avarian recur, feathers sleek with diplomatic oils. They were the architects of a galaxy civilized over millennia, where conflicts were settled through elegant logic, resource calculus, or, when necessary, the clean, horrific totality of plasma warfare. They understood power as a measurable quantity, fleet size, planetary shields, zero-point energy yield. They did not understand the man who stood alone in the center. Elias Thorne was, by galactic standards, a biological antique. No carapace, no natural toxin, no telepathic synapse. His back, straight but bearing an invisible weight, was turned to the Cthari High Swarm Director, Vrax. For 3 standard cycles, Vrax had laid out an irrefutable case. Sensor logs showed a human survey vessel, the Darwin's Gamble, drifting 3 light-years into a sector the Cthari had claimed via resonant asteroid beacons. By the unbreakable codes of the Concord, this was a violation. The penalty was annexation of the offender's system for a period of no less than 5 generations, to instill respect for galactic law. Humanity had no defense. They were pre-FTL, fragmented, their highest weaponry primitive fission devices. They were, in the Concord's eyes, children who had stumbled into a fencing yard. Vrax's final click hiss echoed. The verdict is evident. The system you call Soul will be incorporated into the Cthari Hive for disciplinary stewardship. Resistance, a mandible clacked, a smile of needles, would be illogical. You have no standing, no power here. This was the moment the galaxy expected surrender. It was the moment Elias Thorne began his victory. He did not turn to Vrax. Instead, he addressed the crystalline dome itself, his voice a low, resonant roll in the translator-filtered silence. Power, he said, as if tasting the word. Director Vrax defines it as the capacity to destroy. A simple metric. Clean. He finally moved, not toward the Cthari, but to a clear panel overlooking the planet below, a world of lush, violent violet jungles. My people have a story. It is about a king who asked a philosopher to demonstrate the power of his mind. The philosopher said, I can stand on this scale and make myself heavier or lighter using only thought. The king, intrigued, agreed to the test. The philosopher stepped on. First, he said, I make myself heavy. He strained, face red, and the scale dipped. Now, he said, relaxing, I make myself light. The scale rose. The king was amazed. He did not see that the philosopher had simply been holding his breath, then releasing it. The UVA pulsed a gentle blue confusion. The recurrer preened, annoyed by the parable. Thorne continued, his gaze fixed on the world below. You see the breath, Director Vrax. You see the straining muscle, the red face. You measure the dip of the scale. And you call that power. You have catalogued our fleets, our missiles, our cities. You have weighed them on your scale and found them wanting. You are correct. We would lose any war you force upon us. He turned now, and his eyes were not the eyes of a defeated man. They were the eyes of a surgeon looking at a diseased limb. But you have not asked why our scales are so light. You have not asked what we chose to discard to stand upon them. He tapped a control on his simple wristband. A hologram sprang to life above him. Not of warships, but of Earth. Scenes cascaded, the ancient pyramids rising under a desert sun, thousands straining against stone, the fiery launch of a primitive rocket, a symphony orchestra in mid-crescendo, a lone climber planting a flag on a wind-ripped peak, a scientist weeping before a double helix model, a field of white headstones stretching to a horizon. For 5,000 years of recorded history, Thorne's voice hardened, we have been at war. Not with you, not with aliens, but with ourselves. War against hunger, against disease, against gravity, against the sea, against ignorance, against our own brutal, tribal, greedy, fearful, and selfish natures. Every step of our progress was purchased with the blood of a weaker version of ourselves. We did not wait for evolution to give us stronger carapaces. We forged steel. We did not develop natural poison sacs. We synthesized medicine. We did not evolve to fly. We built wings from metal and fire and dared the sky. Vrax shifted, a dry rustle. A history of self-mutilation. This is not strength. It is pathology. It is forge, Thorn shot back, the word like a hammer strike. You Kthari are born perfect for your role. Worker, warrior, thinker, your biology is your destiny. Your strength is given. Ours is seized. Every day, in a million ways, a human must destroy their weak self. The self that wants to quit, to hate, to steal, to lie, to cower. We have institutionalized this war. We call it education, discipline, ambition, honor. A soldier overcomes the weakness of fear. A scientist overcomes the weakness of assumption. A farmer overcomes the weakness of barren soil. We are a species of perpetual, willful, self-destruction and reconstruction. He changed the hologram. Now it showed data, stark and undeniable. Earth's climatic stabilization in the 22nd century. The renunciation of strategic nuclear weapons in the 23rd. The global reconciliation after the resource wars. You see a pre-FTL, fragmented species. What you are seeing is the result of our victory in the only war that ever mattered. We won our civil war. Against ourselves. The scale is light because we threw off the weight of extinction-level weapons, of climatic suicide, of perpetual planetary strife. We chose to be light enough to finally reach for the stars, not as conquerors, but as students. Thorn paused, letting the images hang. The silence was no longer dismissive, it was tense, pregnant. Director Vrax, you threaten us with annexation. You threaten to send your swarm ships to orbit our world, to administer our lives. You believe this is a punishment. A terrible, serene smile touched Thorn's lips. It is a gift. You will be giving 7 billion veterans of the hardest war in the cosmos a new enemy. And, not just any enemy. An external one. A simple one. One that does not live in our mirror. He took a step toward the Kthari block. You think you will be dealing with farmers and engineers and poets. You will not. You will be dealing with the descendants of those who outthought predators with sharp sticks, who out-endured ice ages, who stared into the abyss of their own souls and did not blink. You will not be administering children. You will be poking a hive of beings whose fundamental identity, whose very source of pride, is overcoming the impossible. Your disciplinary stewardship will become your academy. We will learn your technology not in generations, but in years. We will turn your own systems against you, not with weapons, but with a relentless, adaptive, collective will you cannot comprehend because you have never had to forge it in that furnace. He turned to the galactic concord. You govern by logic and static power metrics. We are a species of narrative. And you have just written yourselves into our story as the new monster to be overcome. Not a monster to be destroyed, a monster to be understood, dismantled, and transcended. We will study you, we will learn you, we will become better at being you than you are, and we will do it without firing a single shot, because that is our habit. That is our nature. The man who has spent a lifetime destroying his weak self can never, ever be destroyed by others. He can only be presented with a new, weaker version of himself to conquer. You are that new challenge. Thorn stopped. He simply stood there, a solitary, unarmed figure in a room of cosmic power. He had not presented a defense. He had presented a prophecy. And it was a prophecy built on a terrifying, undeniable logic. The UVA pulsed a deep, anxious violet. The recur had stilled entirely. Vrax's clicking ceased. The swarm director was connected to the Kthari communal mind. The calculations were running. They were no longer calculating fleet engagements or resource yields. They were attempting to model a psychological, cultural, and evolutionary paradigm for which they had no reference. They were trying to simulate a species whose primary driver was not expansion or resource acquisition, but self-overcoming. The model kept crashing. The variables were infinite. To annex humanity was not to gain a resource-rich backwater. It was to introduce a hyper-adaptive, relentlessly ambitious, and morally convinced cultural virus directly into the Kthari hive mind's body politic. They would not rebel with guns, they would rebel with superior engineering, with irresistible cultural exports, with a concept of freedom and self-determination that could fracture the hive's cohesion. They would turn the Kthari's own children against them, not through violence, but through ideas. The human weakness, their individualism, was, in this context, an unassailable weapon. The silence stretched. In that silence, the galaxy witnessed the first shotless salvo of the war Thorn had declared. It was fired not from a coil gun, but from a revelation. It targeted not ships, but certainty. Finally, the senior UVA representative, Elder Gloon, pulsed a soft, solemn gold, the color of profound recalculation. The Concord requests a recess. We must reconsider the parameters of this judgment. Vrax, for the first time, looked not at a primitive, but at an abyss. He gave a curt, sharp nod of assent. The Kthari delegation withdrew in a susurrus of troubled clicks. Thorn remained, looking once more at the violet world below. The first battle was won. He had forced a galaxy that thought in terms of matter and energy to think in terms of spirit and will. He had not saved humanity by proving their strength. He had saved it by revealing the terrifying, beautiful engine of its weakness and how that perpetual internal war had forged a being unconquerable by any external force. The document would later record that the Kthari withdrew their annexation claim within the cycle. They instead proposed a cultural and technological exchange protocol with tightly monitored, human-led oversight. In private sessions, Vrax was said to have stated, "It is less dangerous to have them as a curious neighbor than as a motivated prisoner. To cage them is to grant them a purpose. And a human with a purpose is a thermodynamic impossibility. They create energy from sheer will, violating all known laws." The Galactic Concord, in a landmark ruling, granted humanity protectorate status with autonomous self-governance, the first such designation not based on military parity but on demonstrated socio-evolutionary resilience. The ruling included a cryptic, now famous addendum: the species Homo sapiens is hereby recognized as a perpetual force of becoming. Contact with said species is to be governed by principles of mutual challenge and growth, not containment. Their greatest export is not a product, but a process, the conscious, willful destruction of limitation. Elias Thorn returned to a Earth that never knew how close it came to subjugation. He reported only, "They have agreed to talk as equals." The celebration was quiet. The work continued. The internal war against poverty, against injustice, against the outer limits of knowledge raged on. It was who they were. And the galaxy watched, with wary awe, as the children who had conquered their own demons began, gently and with relentless curiosity, to ask the stars how they might help them overcome theirs. The victory was total. It was bloodless. And it echoed through the silent halls of power with the force of a billion self-inflicted revolutions, a testament to the truth that the being who is his own greatest enemy, and his own perpetual victor, has nothing left in all creation to fear.